Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're peeling back the layers on decades of accumulated choices, unresolved grief, and deeply held secrets.
All of it converging on one, you know, deceptively beautiful December weekend.
Exactly. We're diving into a stack of sources centered around a high school reunion and a wedding nestled high in the Berkshire Mountains of Massachusetts.
That's right. And this isn't, just a celebratory gathering.
No.
It's a reckoning. We're tracking a really tight-knit group of former classmates from a place called Kid Academy, 27 years after they graduated.
27 years, that's a long time to build a new life.
It is. And on the surface, they've all done it. They're adults, they're professionally successful, seemingly sorted. But this weekend, it forces them to confront the traumatic, awkward, sometimes deeply shaming people they were in their late teens.
So the mission here is really to figure out the true cost of the stories they've been telling themselves and everyone else about their lives.
Precise.
And the setting itself, it immediately signals that we're dealing with this idea of deliberate reinvention. We're at Nora's Inn.
Right. And this place has a history. It used to be this dark, sort of primitive, private home owned by Nora's late husband, the famous poet Karl Lasky.
But Nora has utterly transformed it. I mean, the sources are so specific here.
They are.
It's sheathed in white clapboards and shingles, renovated with this crisp edge achieved through, copious white paint, new lighting, chrome details.
She's taken this monument to Lasky's volatile past and made it modern, profitable, and fiercely her own, independent.
It's the perfect physical manifestation of the whole theme, really.
It really is. The core tension we're tracking is exactly that. It's how much of who we are right now in the present is determined by what we are desperately trying to hide from the past.
Yeah.
Nora's Inn is successful because of that surface, the white paint, the elegant suites. But you just know that beneath those perfectly polished floors, the past isn't just a memory.
No, it's a palpable, unavoidable, and potentially explosive presence. The very air is thick with old guilt and unspoken longing. Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with Nora herself and this intense, almost architectural effort she put into distancing herself from the ghost of Karl Lasky.
Well, the place is a palimpsest of history, right? We learned the building was originally this grand, turn-of-the-century inn.
Right, there's that photograph.
Exactly. From around 1912, viewed through a clear glass negative, you can see the cupola, a rose garden, even a racetrack. It was a whole different world.
Then it became a dark, private home where Lasky lived for 15 years.
And then Nora, after his death, just pours herself into its reconversion, back into an inn.
And it wasn't just a redecoration. She radically reorganized the space.
Yeah, she consolidated 22 smaller rooms into these fewer, much more elegant suites.
Like Agnes's room 22, which is actually a combination of several older, smaller rooms.
It's a physical act of consolidation that just perfectly mirrors her need to consolidate her own identity away from him. She explicitly wanted something of my own.
And she's succeeding. It's a true success in a competitive Berkshire's market, booked solid through February.
But there's also that financial reality check. Harrison, who's our main lens into this world, he wonders if visitors lamented the lost house that Lasky had inhabited.
You know, the primitive dark artist's lair, the myth?
The myth, exactly. But Nora, she just cuts right through that. She admits Lasky's royalties were pitiful.
So the inn wasn't just a passion project, it was a necessity.
Financially necessary, yes. But she emphasizes that the primary desire for her was the independence it gave her.
It's very practical independence built directly on the ruins of her emotional life with this toxic literary celebrity.
And that literary shadow is just immense. I mean, Karl Lasky was a distinguished, if not commercially successful, poet.
Right, perpetually on the short list for the Nobel Prize.
And the source material says that every year the prize was announced, it caused a small seismic shudder in their home.
Even though he claimed to love Seamus Heaney when he won.
Of course.
Yeah.
Lasky leveraged this immense creative presence, but his personal life
Was a wreck.
a total wreck. The world knew it, thanks to that lurid Roscoff biography.
Right. That book essentially ignored the poetry and focused entirely on the darkness.
All of it. His abusive father, an early and persistent drinking problem, nearly obsessive womanizing at NYU, a disastrous first marriage, losing custody of his sons.
The source describes him as this brilliant, charismatic figure, exactly the kind of dangerous and exciting man a 19-year-old might mistake for a soulmate.
Yes, and the narrative takes a really, really dark turn with Lasky's death.
He died by suicide, electrocution, dropping a hairdryer in the bathtub.
And Nora confirms he had terrible throat cancer. He just kept repeating to her, "It's so easy."
He told her the pain defied words, but the truly horrible part, the thing he couldn't face, was the knowing he was going to die.
That phrase, "it's so easy," is just devastating. Initially, Harrison, he struggles to process it. He even calls the suicide the courage to do that.
But Nora, who lived with his self-absorption for decades, she immediately counters that.
Immediately. She says, Carl. Carl would have said cowardice. She understood. In the end, Lasky was choosing the path of least resistance, not bravery. He couldn't face the slow diminishment of terminal illness.
So let's talk about how Nora even got pulled into his orbit in the first place.
She was 19, a sophomore at NYU. He was 49.
A 30-year age difference.
And it began, innocently, or maybe predatorily. He asked for half her sandwich on a bench in Washington Square Park.
And this leads to a long, emotionally intimate park bench affair before anything physical even happened.
Right. And Nora explains that in her young, ambitious mind, sleeping with professors conferred status. It was a currency.
Harrison, looking at their wedding photo, Nora barely 20, Lasky, wild-haired and unfocused, he feels this immediate urge to put an arm between Nora and Carl Lasky.
It's a retroactive, futile gesture of protection, isn't it? He sees that her vulnerability was less about youthful innocence and more about this emotional hunger that Lasky just ruthlessly exploited.
And that exploitation didn't stop once they were married.
Not at all. Which brings us to this monumental confession years later during the reunion weekend. Harrison asks her about Lasky's fidelity.
And Nora admits he was faithful. In reality, yes. In his imagination, no.
But the truth, she reveals, was so much worse than just imagination.
This is where Lasky reveals himself as truly tyrannical.
Absolutely. Nora confesses that Lasky brought a 19-year-old blonde scholarship girl, a townie with bad teeth, into their home. And that girl became pregnant. The cruelty of it is just. It's compounded by his actions while he was dying.
He used his terminal sickness to trample over every good memory. He's listing his affairs.
And finding this twisted enjoyment in hurting Nora precisely because she would survive him, he wanted to leave her with nothing but devastation and doubt.
It's a major insight into how abusers operate. They use vulnerability, even their own demise, as a weapon.
Yes, but the most incredible narrative thread here is Harrison's literary aha moment, which connects the dead man's cruelty directly to Nora's present.
Right. Harrison, being a publisher, reads Lasky's final collection, Burning Trees.
And he finds this shockingly graphic poem called Under the Canted Roof.
The descriptive details, they just jump off the page at him. The woman is blonde and had bad teeth, caressing your tooth with my tongue.
It confirms beyond any doubt that Lasky was writing about the townie girl.
And the gut punch that makes this literary analysis so dark.
As Harrison recognizes the description.
He realizes Lasky was writing about Judy, Nora's current assistant at the inn, the woman who meticulously sets out the food and manages the espresso machine.
The sheer irony is just staggering. Nora, maybe consciously, maybe not, has employed the physical evidence of Lasky's final, most spiteful betrayal.
So every day, Nora is paying the woman who symbolizes Lasky's attempt to destroy her self-worth.
And this is what shifts Lasky in Harrison's mind. He's no longer a complex, troubled genius. He's a self-absorbed tyrant. The poetry, which was once Lasky's defense, his art, now functions as an explicit confession of his malice.
It just fundamentally changes the moral landscape of the story. The white paint, the chrome, the elegant efficiency of Nora's inn.
It's not just a business, it's a monumental psychological fortress built around that one deep daily pain.
Exactly. It shows us that even the most impressive self-reinventions are still haunted by the mundane details the past insists on sharing.
You can change your name, your career, your home, but the people who hurt you still show up, sometimes as your competent assistant.
That sets the stage perfectly for our next section. This idea of building a clean future over a painful secret. It isn't unique to Nora's inn. It's the foundation of Bridget and Bill's new marriage.
Yeah, which is fighting its own physical and emotional ghosts.
So now we turn to Bridget and Bill, the centerpiece of the whole weekend.
They were high school sweethearts who broke up, married other people, and then, dramatically reunited 22 years later at a reunion.
Bill left his wife, Jill, for Bridget, and now they are just racing against the clock of Bridget's illness to formalize their commitment.
And Bridget is dealing with an aggressive breast cancer diagnosis. A lumpectomy, 5 lymph nodes implicated.
requiring rigorous chemotherapy and radiation. The sources really detail the physical betrayal of her own body. She gained 12 pounds in 6 weeks from the treatment.
which she found egregiously insulting right before her wedding.
Of course.
But the emotional weight of the illness, it's profound, but it's met by Bill's truly intense devotion.
He stays home with her during chemo infusions, thinking of the medicine not as poison, but as beneficent potions.
He's present when she throws up. He manages the logistical nightmare of all the treatments. Harrison, when he's observing this, calls Bill's support the definition of true love.
A complete counterpoint to Lasky's transactional cruelty.
Totally. Harrison even admits wishing he could take the illness on himself.
The sources really emphasize the immense psychological toll, specifically the loss of dignity that comes with hair loss and body changes.
And Bridget gets the wig. She travels 3 arduous times to Brooklyn for fittings at a Schiedelmacher.
Not just for herself, but to protect her 15-year-old son, Matt, so he wouldn't have to face the visual reality of how sick she truly was.
But that mask, it comes off in a moment of true intimacy on their wedding night.
She's wearing this antique black silk nightgown, feeling self-conscious about her body, especially the asymmetry from the surgery.
And she finally unclips the wig, tosses it aside, and in this deeply vulnerable whisper, asks Bill to touch me here, running his hand over her scalp.
It's an act of total surrender. It's a testament that Bill loves her, not the idealized image of the bride.
Exactly. But their new family unit, it's so precarious. It's constantly threatened by outside pressures, specifically the trauma inflicted on Matt by his mother's illness.
And this is where we get the incident with the alcohol.
Right. Matt, feeling overwhelmed and just terrified of his mother's death, steals an entire fifth of vodka from the freezer and binges with his friend Lucas on a Sunday night.
Bridget finds him unconscious, with orange-colored vomit on the carpet. Police, an ambulance.
A complete loss of control, publicized to the whole neighborhood. Just a parent's nightmare.
And Bridget is consumed by anxiety. She's worrying about whether Matt inhaled the vomit or if he'd blown out his kidneys.
But the source offers this fascinating piece of internal speculation from her. She later wonders if the nearly fatal binge and subsequent survival hadn't purged him of his fear of death, hers.
He faced his worst fear, losing control, maybe dying, and survived. Maybe it neutralized the overwhelming fear of his mother's mortality.
It's a very complex dynamic of secondary trauma. And Bridget is also anxious about Matt discovering the messy truth of their reunion.
The fact that Bill left his wife for her.
Right. She fears Bill's daughter, Melissa, will spill the beans. But when Bridget finally tries to confess the history to Matt,
he just replies with a shrug. I knew that, Mom.
That simple statement is so telling. It's a moment of immense relief for Bridget, but also a powerful insight into teenage awareness.
Parents often operate under this assumption that they're successfully shielding their children.
When in reality, kids are acutely aware of the underlying emotional currents and secrets.
And despite all this chaos, we get this moment of grace at the wedding, entirely orchestrated by Matt.
Bill, Matt, and Matt's friend Brian, they show up in tuxedos, a surprise Matt arranged for the intimate event.
And Nora, aware of Bridget's physical fragility, ensures that Bridget is seated comfortably between Bill and Matt at dinner, creating this small, perfect, protected sphere of family.
It's tainted happiness, yes, but it is happiness nonetheless.
Which you have to contrast with the profound, solitary, decades-long secret of Agnes O'Connor. She embodies the opposite extreme of dealing with emotional pain.
Absolutely. Agnes outwardly is stability defined.
The sturdy history teacher and field hockey coach at Kid Academy.
Right, referring to herself as a spinster, a word she considers hateful, living in a condo carved from an old house in Maine with a 2-story turret overlooking the ocean.
She is the perennial good girl who never quite left the high school environment, just in a teaching capacity.
And the secret she carries is just staggering. A 26-year affair with her former English teacher, Jim Mitchell, who's now teaching in Wisconsin.
26 years.
And the source tells us the affair began after she had a staged fall, or maybe just weak legs, outside his office.
Which led him to take her to the emergency room and then a kiss in his car.
And the structure of this affair is defined entirely by stolen moments and anonymity. They meet in neutral cities in anonymous hotels for a night or a weekend.
The source pulls a line from her unsent letter to him, where she describes herself as Jim's other wife, your second wife, the one who waits for you at her hut.
She feeds off these fleeting visits, convinced that what they share is beyond anything they could ever imagine.
I mean, the psychological stamina required to maintain that level of dependency and secrecy for 26 years is just astounding.
And the sources show her constant fight against that longing. She attempts to short-circuit it by forcing herself to think about mundane things, grading papers, field hockey drills.
Or even historical catastrophes.
Right. And then, at the wedding dinner, the cataclysm, fueled by emotion, maybe too much alcohol, the pressure of the hidden life just becomes too much.
Agnes drops the bombshell during a quiet moment. She blurts out, "I love him. I always have."
And Harrison, thinking of high school crushes, says, "We all did."
And she has to clarify, "No, I mean, I love him." The devastating clarification comes when she's asked why it's not great.
And she just says, "He's married. He's been married the whole time."
The entire table is stunned. But Jerry Lydon, ever the opportunistic, self-appointed moralizer, he immediately judges Mitchell.
Of course he does. "He's using you," he says.
Yeah.
And Agnes just snaps back, defending the integrity of the emotional bond, insisting Jerry knows nothing about it.
It highlights the difference between a simple moral judgment and the complexity of a relationship that has endured for decades, defining her entire adult identity.
Yes. And she reflects, in that unsent letter, on the tragedy of her profession. She makes her living off the chronicles of others, she teaches history, but failed to chronicle the one thing that mattered most.
Her own love affair, which she wished could have been an entity with a life of its own.
The terror she faces is the potential vanishing of her identity. She realizes that if she were to die suddenly, who would tell Jim?
Wow.
The source is forcing us to contrast the visible, public suffering of Bridget, who is loved and supported, with the quiet, invisible trauma of Agnes, whose entire love life is a secret that might die with her.
This contrast between the loud drama of personal suffering and the silent burden of hidden truths, it brings us directly to our next major theme.
The democracy of catastrophe and how personal drama stacks up against historical trauma.
For this specific group of high school friends, the past is defined by a very specific, localized tragedy. The death of their charismatic former roommate, Stephen Otis, just a month before graduation.
Stephen was the golden boy. Incredibly handsome, a great athlete, slated for a Stanford scholarship.
But, and this is crucial, by senior year, he was already a serious drunk.
The tragedy wasn't just his death, it was the failure to live up to his own promise.
And the sources detail the fatal night. After a drunken party at a break-in beach house, Stephen, distraught after catching Harrison and Nora kissing or embracing,
he stumbles toward the 40-degree water to wash out the pants he had soiled. He ignores Harrison's weak warning, drowns, and his body washes up a week later on Pepperell Island.
And Harrison, our narrator, is just consumed by survivor's guilt.
He mentally replays the sequence, waiting too long, being frozen by Stephen's extreme drunkenness, feeling the filthy, shameful sort of tragedy that clings to the survivors.
It's the kind of death that leaves a moral stain, not just simple sadness.
And Jerry later expresses his own helpless anger about it, arguing that they all got away with murder by not intervening more forcefully.
So Harrison tries to give Stephen's lost life some meaning. He engages in this complex fantasy. Stephen, the professional athlete, batting .3011, Gold Glove winner, destined for the Hall of Fame.
But he eventually concludes that Stephen's life, despite all the advantages, lacked an essential authenticity, which, in his mind, ultimately made his death pointless.
It's a way for Harrison to process the guilt, right?
Yeah.
By downgrading the value of the life that was lost.
It seems that way. And this personal catastrophe, the pointless death of a friend, is immediately overlaid with the contemporary trauma of 9/11, which defines the emotional atmosphere of the whole reunion.
The weekend is unseasonably warm, hitting 72 degrees in December.
Which Nora interprets as nature mocking their grief. All that horror, all that grief.
And this external trauma provokes this intense debate among the classmates about who has the right to claim the emotional territory of the disaster.
Yes, and Jerry Lydon, ever the boundary setter, insists that only those in the vicinity of the disaster have a right to speak of it.
He says, pointedly, you can't really know about it if you weren't there.
Jerry's view is essentially an emotional coping mechanism. He's trying to contain the pain by geographically limiting it.
But Bridget, she counters this isolationist view powerfully.
Well, dealing with cancer has completely redefined her understanding of vulnerability. She argues that no one at this table was untouched or unmoved. The catastrophe hurt all of us.
And Rob Zor, he kind of synthesizes their arguments by defining catastrophe as the most democratic of events.
And Agnes recalls their old teacher, Jim Mitchell, discussing the democracy of catastrophe, when they read All Quiet on the Western Front back in high school.
So the source is arguing that whether the trauma is a missed phone call, a diagnosis, or a national tragedy, the effect is universally destabilizing.
It's a profound link. The event, whether it's the towers falling or the water washing away Stephen, it fundamentally changes your relationship with the predictability and safety of the world.
It's what forces these seemingly stable adults to examine all the quiet compromises they've made since then.
But Agnes, ever the historian, finds solace in an even older, more massive trauma, the Halifax Explosion of 1917.
She uses this historical obsession to actively short-circuit her own self-destructive longing for Jim. She substitutes existential global pain for her private romantic pain.
And the details of this explosion are horrifyingly specific. It happened on December 6, 1917, when the French freighter Mont Blanc, tagged with picric acid, benzol, and TNT,
collided with the Immo in Halifax Harbor. The fire drew thousands of curious citizens to their windows to watch the spectacle.
a deadly curiosity. When the Mont Blanc exploded at 9:05 a.m., the blast shattered the windows of Halifax, sending deadly glass slivers into the faces and eyes of the onlookers.
2,000 people died, 9,000 were wounded, and nearly 200 were blinded, many of them children. It's a tragedy built on simple, morbid curiosity.
And the sources weave in this secondary narrative of Innes Finch, a physician apprentice who survives the blast.
He immediately begins treating the injured in these horrifying rudimentary conditions, removing glass shards, setting bones.
The sheer scale of suffering is what causes him to conceive of a malevolent God. This is the historical weight that Agnes uses to ground her own spiraling emotions.
And Innes's personal fallout leads to a key philosophical insight that connects all these traumas back to Agnes's own choices.
Yes. Innes eventually marries Louise, the daughter of his host family, who is rendered blind, lame, and angry by the blast. He marries her, he realizes, to let Hazel, the other well-mannered daughter, go.
He sacrifices his own unexpressed desire for a life of duty.
But the real revelation comes from Hazel. Witnessing the aftermath of the explosion, the sudden, irreversible change to life, causes her to break off her own engagement.
She realizes that a calamity makes you aware that you cannot be indifferent toward your life. You cannot simply give away your life. It demands radical truth right now.
And the source is making a powerful argument there. Whether it's a global blast, a personal diagnosis, or just a high school reunion, external pressure forces you to stop defaulting into a life and start actively choosing one.
And that idea brings us right into our final section as we examine the adult identities these classmates have painstakingly built.
And whether those lives were chosen or simply defaulted to.
The reunion acts as a test, and it often shatters first impressions. Look at Rob Zoer.
Right. Harrison is genuinely stunned to realize that Rob is gay, a fact he hadn't known from their time at Kid.
Rob is now this polished, elegant man who brought his partner, Josh, a successful cello player.
Rob's success is defined by self-acceptance. He got into Juilliard with the help of a dedicated music teacher, Mrs. Lamb. He jokes that he stays trim due to nerves, but he is living an authentic life.
He admits to Harrison that he was aware he was gay at Kid, but hoped it wasn't true.
Acknowledging the immense pressure of their environment, he says, "I don't know anyone who's glad of it as a boy."
Which contrasts so sharply with the toxic masculinity that surrounded Stephen Otis's self-destruction.
Completely. Then you have Jerry and Julie Lydon. Jerry is the success-obsessed caricature who mostly wanted me to know how successful he'd become.
Competitive, overtly hostile towards Harrison. His marriage to Julie appears cold, she seems quiet, and drinks only water. Harrison assumes she is the subordinate traditional wife.
But here's where those assumptions are just totally challenged. Julie is revealed to be a powerful, high-level finance executive, a senior VP for corporate finance at Credit Suisse, living in Tribeca.
Her quiet composure isn't passivity, it's the armor of a woman dealing with immense career pressure.
And as Jerry blurts out, the immense stress of raising their autistic daughter, Emily.
Suddenly, the layers are peeled back, and it explains Jerry's intensity, his coldness.
Yes, and the source material shows his surprising philanthropic side. He gives millions to Doctors Without Borders.
Suggesting his compulsion for success and control is maybe an attempt to manage his profound inability to control the variables in his personal life, like his daughter's condition.
It's a perfect example of how the adult life is built on these elaborate, often contradictory compromises. Everyone at the table has immense hidden struggles. Harrison, our guide, is no exception.
He's a publisher specializing in the marginal literary works he loves, poetry or biographies, but he's reduced to editing self-help books to keep the company in the black.
He compromises his literary ideals for financial stability.
And his family life, which is ostensibly the pillar of his adult success, is fraught with this disquiet.
He lives in Toronto with his wife, Evelyn, an estate lawyer, and their 2 boys. But when he thinks of his cluttered kitchen and Evelyn in her pink cashmere robe, he recognizes a brutal truth.
He doesn't wish himself there.
He diagnoses his marriage as being disappointed by the death of hope, yet he maintains the structure, a good family, moments of true joy, especially with the boys or during Sunday morning intimacy.
But he notices a critical paradox. He thinks of Evelyn with more fondness when he is separated from her than when he is actually with her.
The absence allows for romanticization. The presence demands effort and faces down disappointment.
And this midlife disquiet, amplified by the resurrection of his 27-year-old desire for Nora, it culminates in the necessary rupture of his controlled life.
He gives in to the longing. He sleeps with Nora in her suite after the cocktail party.
The physical intimacy is immediate, but the emotional cost is staggering. Afterwards, separated, he feels physical pain and declares, "I love you."
But he instantly recoils from the words, calling them trite and saccharine. The moment of ultimate truth immediately feels cheapened by language.
But the Lasky parallel, that provides the necessary clarity for him.
Right. Harrison, realizing Lasky's betrayal was Judy, confirms this with Nora. He finally sees Lasky not as a poetic genius who just happened to be cruel, but as a calculated, self-absorbed tyrant.
And this realization of Nora's deep, long-standing trauma makes his own quiet disappointment feel trivial and cowardly by comparison.
And that knowledge acts as a catalyst. Harrison packs up, he tears up the letter he wrote to Evelyn,
A letter he realizes she would read and note the repetition of Nora's name.
and he leaves the inn. He acknowledges what happened was a catastrophe for him, personally, and the separation hurts physically, like a wound being torn open.
It's an agonizing conclusion. Harrison drives away, acknowledging that leaving might be all wrong for all the right reasons.
He's choosing risk, rupture, and potential emotional disaster over the quiet, respectable, and comfortable disappointment of his current life.
So the sheer volume of hidden trauma beneath the surface of these seemingly successful lives is it's staggering.
It is. Whether it's Bridget fighting cancer while planning a joyous new future, or Agnes maintaining a 26-year secret that defines her identity, everyone is carrying decades of carefully managed baggage.
And the high school reunion functions as this perfect crucible, forcing the tension between the life one lives and the life one dreams of.
Harrison, Agnes, Rob, they all have to confront that gap between their compromised professional or romantic reality and the idealized life they chased.
This deep dive really shows us that external trauma, whether 9/11, the Halifax Explosion, or even just a cancer diagnosis, it plays a vital role in clarifying personal decisions.
It brings us back to Hazel Finch's realization after the explosion. A calamity makes you aware that you cannot be indifferent toward your life. You cannot simply give away your life.
You're forced to make radical decisions because the timeline of your life suddenly feels very, very fragile. What stands out to you most after seeing all these secrets surface? For me, it's the idea that the good life we project is almost always built upon layers of secrets, layers of compromise, and sometimes even necessary self-inflicted catastrophe. Harrison had to blow up his marriage to force himself to stop defaulting.
That's a great point. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to consider Agnes. After her devastating confession, she resolves to return to Kid, to correct history papers and attend field hockey meetings, chasing balls and completing drills.
Back to the routine.
Back to the routine. What if the only way to escape the crushing emotional pain of the past, whether it's Harrison's guilt over Stephen's death or Agnes's decades of longing, is not through radical confession or reenactment, but through the quiet, consistent rigor of the present day?
So the mundane routine.
Perhaps true peace is found in the ordinary tasks, not the grand gesture.
So what does this all mean? We are left with Harrison's final image as he drives away. The young newlyweds from the parallel Corolla Youngbacker wedding party, skipping off to their waiting car with uncommon beauty and thrilling risk.
They are stepping into a completely unknown future.
So when you're facing a future defined by uncertainty, whether it's a terrifying illness, a new marriage, or a divorce, is the greatest act of courage simply the willingness to risk the mess of a complicated life.
Like Bridget marrying Bill despite her diagnosis, or Harrison choosing emotional disruption rather than retreating into the solitude and silence of an examined, yet ultimately empty, life of quiet disappointment.
A lot to think about as you navigate the quiet compromises and the thrilling risks of your own reality. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.